Shaun here, the behavior change coach, back on another episode of Always Another Game. Today, I have probably one of my most unique sports that I've had on here so far. To be honest, before I met this guest, I didn't actually realize there was anything competitive in this field. So I can't wait to delve deeper into this athlete's mind to learn a little bit more about their history and the transfer of skills from his sport into what he is doing today. Today, I have with me Ollie Mell. Ollie, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very good. I'm excited about this one. What I tend to do with a lot of my guests is send out a little form to get a bit more background, anything they want to cover. And I want to make sure that this episode does you justice, Ollie, because there is a lot to go through and a lot to learn from you.
I suppose it's been quite an interesting kind of like 20 years for me, really. But we can go back into kind of like my upbringing and living in different countries and living abroad and kind of how that shapes your view of yourself and your view of your surroundings. As I suppose that's probably somewhat different to most people. Growing up being an immigrant or a tourist or something is something that a lot of British people don't like actually have. So we can start there if you want, really, or sort of later on in life. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, we're gonna dive right in. So for anybody that is listening right now, Ollie is in Kettlebell Sports. Now, kettlebells came very popular in the fitness industry, in the PT world, in my early days. So I've been doing about 13 years now. So it must have been good 10 or so years ago. It became really popular. It was all the craze, all PTs were doing it. There was classes galore. But you're in the sporting area of it. It actually is a professional sport.
Yeah. So a bit like most personal trainers, when I first started training with kettlebells, I had no idea there was a sport involved in it. So I know we said we started at the beginning, but essentially I first got into kettlebells in 2007, 2008. And there was kind of two avenues that kind of got me into it at the same time. So I was working in security as like a nightclub bouncer. And I used to do this Russian martial art, which it's not a sport. I used to do a lot of sports, sort of combat sports as well. But this was a kind of real self-defense based martial art. And the instructor would sort of bring these old Russian kettlebells out, and they looked like they were handmade, like at the time of Lord of the Rings or something. They were these really old, like proper battered bits of metal. And we'd just get beasted with them. And I kind of really enjoyed it. And at the same time, I was a fitness instructor in Northwich in Cheshire, and I was doing my qualifications to be a PT. And there was one personal trainer at this gym that kind of stood out head and shoulders above the rest, is how he was sort of like the busiest one, always had new clients, always like kept the clients that he had, was always working, always in great shape, and he would primarily work with kettlebells. So I kind of cozied up to him and did this typical thing of trying to basically have him take me like under his wing. So I do things like set up kit for him, bring him a constant supply of coffee and tea, and kind of like always asking questions. And he started training me with the kettlebells, and I had a few shoulder injuries. I've gone through, and instantly that started to improve. And I was looking for ways to train myself as a fighter, and my main thing was that. So that's my phone going. My main thing was that I lacked real explosive power. So like I was never good enough. I was never going to be good enough to make it as a professional fighter. I was never really an amazing amateur fighter, to be like brutally honest. And one of the things that I was trying to always work on wasn't getting stronger. It was getting more explosive and more powerful. And that was what the kettlebells started to do. And then when I became a personal trainer, I made the decision to go away from working in a corporate gym, and I went into like a private studio, and I just kind of found myself as that kettlebell person. And this was when you didn't have, like, YouTube wasn't what it is now. Facebook wasn't what it is now. Information was kind of hard to come by. So I'd try and network with people. And in the UK, there was really just a handful of people that were doing kettlebells at this point. There was Jason Kent over up in Leeds. There was Paul Connor, who I was already sort of training and learning with. And then there was London Kettlebells down south. And I just kind of tried to learn everything from the guys who ultimately became Strong First as a company, which is probably the most famous kind of hard style version of kettlebell training, which is where I know sort of a Commando Temple from, where I know James St. Pierre and all of these guys. But you really had to kind of like, you really had to work to find information. And this naturally led me to, around that time, a guy called Steve Cotter, who was probably the most out there person. Once I went through all of Russian kettlebell systems and all of Pavel and all of that stuff, which I mastered that stuff first, and that was why I ate, slept, and breathed for a while. But because it was in book format and because it was in kind of DVD format, there was no continued learning. So once, and I'm that sort of person, but it's like, okay, master the kettlebell swing, right? What's next? Okay, master a kettlebell snatch, and that takes a bit of time to people. And then I was like, okay, but how do I learn to teach that? How do I learn to teach that to clients? So I developed like my own sort of systems with it. But once I found Steve Cotter, that was where I found a company called the IKFF, and they were the first people to talk about this as a sport. And that's when you kind of really kind of went, oh wow, okay, you can. I was like, I can do a sport with an exercise that I love, where no one's going to try and punch me in the face. And to me, that was just like, because by that point I was like 30 years old already. It was that kind of thing. Like if you were gonna be as good as you wanted to be, you'd be there by now. And then people that are younger than you are overtaking you, and you kind of need to know in those types of sports what you're doing to your body. And from that age already, my body was starting to feel it. And with kettlebell sports, there's very little instance of injury. You can overtrain, you can hurt yourself in any sport, but it was one of these ones that it just fit with me, and I started to have not immediate success, but I started to make progress with it. So I think I became one of the first people in England to actually go and compete. I went off to Detroit in 2012 for what was my first competition, which was an IKFF Championships, and that was around the time like I decided, as much as I'd sort of learned, as much as I love being a personal trainer, and as happy I'm going back into personal training, I had an itch to go and do something different, which was when I kind of literally just kind of packed my bags up and joined the Marines and just kind of went, right, I'm off having the adventure of my life. And when I came out 4 years later, there was an English Kettlebell Association. There was sort of multiple organisations that had come over to the UK that are given access to do these competitions. And there was an infrastructure that simply wasn't really there 2007, 2008 when I started. And now it's really easy to get into the sport. And now I'm the English Kettlebell Association Sport Development Officer. So now I'm on the committee for it. And I'm on a massive drive. My lifting, I'm incredibly lucky in terms of what I've been able to achieve. I've been incredibly fortunate to work with some brilliant coaches like Steve Cotter, like David Cohen. And I've been incredibly fortunate to get as far as I've got with it. And now at the age of 41, it's becoming time for me to step aside from competing and really step into coaching and really step into to building the sport as a viable thing. So my real mission and my aim for doing these podcasts and my aim for being on social media as much is all about moving this sport forward to a point where you can go to a primary school, you can go to a secondary school, you can go to a university, you can go to a normal gym and find a kettlebell sports club with a coach, with a team of people that is training. And that's where I want the sport to be in 5 years, 10 years time.
Yeah, and that's what I find fascinating. As we said early on there, kettlebells were massive in regards to the fitness industry. It started to fade away. Other things become popular for like the fitness industry fad. Anybody that doesn't know, kettlebell is a very heavy ball with a handle on it that's used as a resistance training. And as you said, a lot of people will know what a kettlebell swing is and they'll enjoy it. Some people probably feel a sore back from it, but it's a different way of training, which is unique, and again, it can keep things very interesting. But what I find fascinating is even if these things feel like they are drifting out, they're not. They're forming a stronger bond. CrossFit, you could argue, is another one that was very hot, and in the fitness area, it felt like it fizzled out. But actually, there's a huge community, and it's a huge professional event, and that's what I love. Is these things actually find their people, and then they evolve into something stronger. Maybe not as big, but definitely stronger.
Yeah, I think CrossFit is a really good example of how you can take a project and really drive it professionally. I mean, if you look at the early days of CrossFit as opposed to where they are now, the turning point of any growing sport is no one's going to pay lifters contracts that they pay footballers or bodybuilders or American sports stars, and that's a very naive concept of what professional sport is. You know, that's the equivalent of just saying you're going to win the lottery, you know, by all kind of reality. What CrossFit did really, really well is they created a business model, and they went and got sponsorship, and then they basically did the key things to get people into it, which is awareness of the sport. That's the number one thing. And they needed Reebok to do that, to bring the money in to do that. They needed accessibility, which they did with their own business model by franchising, which is again something that CrossFit did exceptionally well. And then they need a platform, which again was sponsorship based. So once they got on the TV systems and they had platforms to get accessibility and B awareness, the sport just took off. They made it look cool. They made it look sexy. You know, they did everything they needed to do to put the American stamp on it as a product. And it's a, you know, I can 100% see it's not my sport. It's not my thing that I'm invested in. But looking at it from the outside eye, they did an incredible job of making it viable, and it works. You know, it's a multi-country sort of entity now, but you can go to Thailand and go to a CrossFit gym. It's a branded CrossFit gym that pays an affiliation to the business. You know, we've got one down the road from us. I was teaching in a CrossFit gym, you know, up until I opened my own place out, because typically, you know, again, yeah, it's got the image of being a jack of all trades, master of none. CrossFit as a sport. So a lot of the CrossFit teachers didn't really understand why their backs were hurting doing a kettlebell swing, like you said. So I've done a lot of work in CrossFit gyms teaching people how to properly swing a kettlebell for more than 10 reps and how to properly hold a kettlebell. And it's the things that gave me the success were obsessing over small details and then finding a way to teach those small details. So I think I tried to count it, but I kind of lost count around 40 in terms of how many gold medals I've coached from athletes at my gym at the world stage. National, I've completely lost count. But the things that I've found have had the success have been programming and how to effectively program, which is my background, coming from a personal trainer that did a lot of sports. So I've done a lot of work with triathlon runners, done a lot of work with long distance runners. So programming and just the fine details, which has a lot. You have a lot of patience to kind of teach it and learn it. But taking that to CrossFit again was pretty successful, because a lot of CrossFit lifters, you can see from the way they're holding the handle that the bell's uncomfortable in the forearms, and they just put up with it, and that's costing them time and costing them reps in their events. And those little tweaks were very valuable to us guys.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I think the success is in the small details. It's in the foundation building, and often in our industry, it's, you know, you're sold the dream, you're sold what's sexy, and often it's too big. It is the basics and the foundation building which creates the success for anybody. I've spoke about it before about the success that the English or the British cycling team had, and with Sky, and they had all scientists come in and look at like 0.9 weight on the bolts, and it's all those little bits. But you know, Ollie, I think you're the first other personal trainer that I've had on here. So it'd be fascinating to know, because you said a minute ago that you took a break.
Yes.
You said you went into the Royal Marines. Now, I've done personal training. I understand why you would have taken a break for many, many different reasons. But what was it for you? How come you decided to step away at that moment?
There was some personal things that were happening in my life at a time that I just wanted to run away from, to be honest. And I'll, you know, by looking back on it now with some distance, I'll admit that. But in a sense, business-wise, so again, there's an image of what a personal trainer's life is like. Yeah, there's this idea when you see how much money you're paying a personal trainer if you have one, depending on where you are, and it's always fascinating me how much people charge. So if you're a PT in London, you can be charging me. I've seen people charge £70 plus, probably way more than that now, for an hour for personal training. And whatever means you justify that by, that's your business. But you have this image of that person, and they go, "Oh, you're working 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. God, you must be raking in." The amount of work that's done outside of the actual PT session is exceptional. And also the business deals that most gyms have for personal trainers is actually really bad. So out of the money a personal trainer is taking, you know, they can be walking away with less than 50% of that price. And that's kind of where that kind of image of how many hours you have to do as a PT to make your business viable heavy. So essentially, I'm not gonna, I'm good. I'm on speaking terms with the person whose gym I was working with at the time, and then he has a gym and I have a gym in the same town, and I like to have good rapport and things. But I wasn't happy with the business agreement, and I basically wanted to go into like a deal that would be better for me. And when that fell through, the business relationship was tarnished, and it was time for me to go. So I bounced around other gyms, bounced around other places. And it got to that point where I just kind of had that little breakdown and just thought, right, I'm packing my bags and I'm off. And it was the best 4 years of my life going into military service. Again, like you always see things differently after enough time has passed from it. I do train every now and then because of my background and because I was in the Royal Marines, which have that establishment and that heritage and that pride with them. I do frequently have a couple of younger lads who are trying, and sometimes females, who are wanting me to train them for selection processes. So I do have some involvement with some of the AFCOs around certain areas. I've been very candid, very honest about my experience in the military. I recommend it to the right people, and I've got no problems telling people, you want to do yourself a favor, and if you want to go learn this lesson the hard way, learn it the hard way, but it's not for you. I'll be honest, like I struggled massively with the fitness side to the training, and I was in good shape. The main thing I had going against me was my age. So I was 30 years old when I went into the training at Lympston for the 32 weeks, which makes me one of the older, not oldest, but it makes me one of the older people to actually pass out or train with a green beret. The average age of the people I was sort of in training with was kind of like early 20s. And that's probably the best age to do it in all reality, because the toll it takes on your body is phenomenal. But the lessons you learn through it, through what you succeed in, through what you fail in, for what you struggle in, and how you kind of deal with that, they've stayed with me forever. And the decision to leave also, that stayed with me forever, when it's the right time to get out, which it was. And again, that was kind of personal and family reasons why I wanted to leave. But yeah, that 4-year break was really important for me. It was a big growing curve for me. I needed to do it, and it kind of like it also made me realize how much I actually enjoy training people. So I have it's definitely my calling is definitely training other people for skill sets. So I teach health and safety, I teach first aid, which are all skills and trades I learned when I was in military service. So I have sort of side work on the side to that, which boosts the income going into the gym, which is a pretty decent way of doing it when you're in your own business, because you're always one phone call away from success or failure when it's your actual business. So having that is a good backup for it. But whatever I'm teaching, whether it's fitness, whether it's health and safety, whether it's first aid, I like working with people, hands-on working with people, and actually like helping people. That's definitely what I enjoy doing the most, in any like way, shape, or form that I can do it. And it took a little break from doing it for me to kind of realize that this is what I want to do with myself.
Yeah. Going back to the start there, as a PT, I can understand exactly everything you were saying. It's not as glamorous as many people may perceive it to be. It is a lot of hard work. I remember before lockdown, I was getting up at 5 o'clock, home at 9:30, eating dinner at 10 o'clock, and going again. And there's been times within my journey that I considered, well, what do I want to do? Is there something else? For you, did you know it was going to be the Marines, or did that come up, completely off the cuff?
Well, when I moved, it was somewhat off the cuff. It was more a thing that I grew up. So I lived in France as a kid, and then when we moved to England, we moved very close to an army camp. So even though my parents, I've got a long history of military service in my family, but my mum and my father we're not servicemen, but we've always lived around that environment. So I've always had this kind of thing about going and doing it. A lot of my friends that grew up, if you grew up in that town, the chances were you'd be a squatty. And you worked in the first bars I worked in, the first jobs were all squatty pubs and squatty places. So I was always in that environment. And then when I decided to go for it, it became this thing of like, I'll always in life, I'll always take the shot. And if you swing and you miss, you swing and you miss. But I was never going to be that person who didn't take the shot. And I got to an age where I thought, if you don't do it now, you're gonna regret it. And I never really thought I would actually like make it to the end of the process and actually get my green beret. But I thought, if you're gonna do something, try and do the best that you can do at it. And so therefore for me, because I knew the failure rate, I knew that I knew that, you know, the chances at that age, the chances at any age to actually successfully pass out as training as a women's commando are very stacked against you. It's something like 1% from the recruitment process actually make it, which is their slogan. 99% need not apply. So I kind of thought, set yourself the job that's almost impossible, break it down into steps, get there in the best space you can be, sort of physically and mentally. And it's that journey of kind of like how far do I last? And you can get things where you kind of I was expecting at almost every point where you can fail to fail, like, because it was that tough. So I was thinking like at each stage there's pass or fail tests for you. So you've got like your first 2 weeks in foundation training where they can get rid of you, kind of like when they just say like you're not good enough, you can fail there. You can do your gym pass out at 9 weeks and you can fail there. You can fail one of the first, they got one of the first exercises halfway through is pass or fail. That's the first one. And that step you can. So it became kind of like a, can I make it to this? That kind of broke the 32 weeks down for me. And then all of a sudden, you're there for a long period of time, but all of a sudden the end like comes in sight. And then you kind of realize, Jesus, actually like a chance I might make this. And then your mindset kind of shifts and changes towards it. So it was picked, to answer your question, it was picked because it was difficult. And therefore, in trying to achieve what is difficult, I have to improve myself to get there. And that's something that's pretty important for me. And that, you know, that competitive drive in sports has done a lot for myself. So, you know, I got into this sport thinking you're going to meet some great people, you're going to be at the start of something. And when I was first doing it before I was in the Marines, it was kind of like these guys that are better than me, I'd be pretty cool if I could be as good as them one day. And then leaving the Marines, it became that focus of I want to be the best that there is. And in order to do that, I need to work out what I need to do it, and then get a plan in place to do it. And it's you know, that mindset will put you so far in life. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to achieve what you want. I know some very, very good, some of my best friends that are in this sport and haven't won anything like what I have, and they're just as good as me, if not better. But the mindset that I have following what you have to do to get there gives you a resilience that anything's achievable. It's just that matter of being realistic over it, breaking it down into strategies and breaking it down into kind of processes, and then just attacking it relentlessly.
Where do you feel that mindset was formed?
100% is formed in military service. 100%.
Okay.
It's that very true fact. That's where you get people that literally say joining in American culture and things like that. It's in their military, which I've got a lot of people who I make connections with. That's drilled into you from day one. So you can look at very successful people that have come out of military service, and they all have that trait.
Yeah. So it's funny, being a non-military person, I'm sure there's others listening. When you hear the word pass out, you think that's exactly what I would be doing if I was in there. Okay. So it's quite ironic that they actually call it that when you finish. Yeah. So what do you think the difference was for someone like yourself who made it through versus somebody who actually not even failed, quit?
Well, first of all, there's no shame in failing in life. There's no shame in failing in stuff. I'm no better. And I was never this concept when you talk to people and people who serve with me will laugh when I say this, and then they'll agree with you first. It's not like I was Rambo. I was never going down for special forces selection. I was never, you know, I was at the standard to achieve what I achieved. So it's not like I'm sort of any of these guys that you see on TV, and the amount of military, this perception of what military service actually is, opposed to the reality of it, is completely different. But that's a different conversation. What I did in order to finish and get to the end of it, as opposed to people who quit, was I was able to see past the immediate, which is where you're having a bad day at work, you're having whatever you're having in life, you have these immediate problems, and we all have them. I was able to see 3 months down the line where I'll be 6 months down the line. So nobody enjoys the training process in being a Marine, because it's the scariest environment you can imagine. You're constantly being pushed physically, mentally. Very little time to yourself. You're working. You're constantly being pushed, really, essentially past your breaking point. And they do that because potential life you're going to go into is going to be just as demanding as that. The people who quit, they just couldn't detach themselves away from what they were suffering at the moment. And that's all it is. And we haven't really talked about what Kettlebell Sports is, but Kettlebell Sports is an endurance event where essentially you're on discomfort, pain, and you're pacing yourself and exerting yourself really, really hard for periods of time that go from 10 minutes to half an hour to an hour or even 2 hours. At any one point, at any second, you can quit when you do. And some people do. So if we do a kettlebell marathon as a 1 hour set, if you put the bell down before the end of the hour, you get a did not finish, like if you quit running away halfway through. So any second of any one of those 60 minutes, you have that ability to quit. It suits me that well because I'm always thinking about what I have to do for the next rep, and then I'm thinking about getting to the end of the hour, and I don't let anything else get into my head. And that's a tactic that I built when you're doing a 3-day training exercise and you haven't slept. Some you're cold, you're wet, you haven't slept, you haven't eaten, you've got a corporal screaming at you, you've made a mistake, so the guy to your left's mad at you, you're really in a bad place. If you get through it and get to the end of the exercise, you've got a bed to sleep in, you've got a week where you're not out in the field, you've got that to look forward to, and then you've got the lifestyle you'll have when you finish and when you pass out. So the ability to kind of like detach yourself from what you're in and focus on what you're trying to do was a massive skill that I just kind of mastered in some senses.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that, because I've read before, I can't remember where I read it, but they talk about people going through training and they use that strategy of I've just got to make it to breakfast. I've just got to get through this next drill, and they broke it down into chunking into sections. And I think that is a huge skill on everything that we do. We don't have to worry, about 10 days time all the time. It's like, can I get through this next phase to lunchtime? And you can make it as small or as big as you need to, but you chunk that down into manageable tasks that you can succeed on.
It's exactly right. So you need to have almost 2 brains when you're doing things like this. And one brain is literally what I call one more rep. Just like when you're coaching people that are trying to do, I have clients that have done ultra marathons. So if you're trying to run a marathon, in one part of your head is just saying one more step. Similar to kettlebells, you're just thinking one more rep. And there's many like there's so many stories from this, but essentially it's true. You wake up, the first thing you need to do is get your pit space clean, do your admin to start the day off. That's the first thing. But like you said, make it to breakfast. And from there, you just got to make it to the next thing. And you just got to make it to the next thing. And that process is really, whether you call it stoic, whether you call it whatever you want to call it, if you can master that, it's a skill set. It's a skill set for any equation in life that you want to get to. The other thing you have to have as well, the other part of the brain is the why are you doing this? And that's the long term that you need as well. Why am I putting myself through this? What am I going to achieve by it? Am I going to achieve a job? Am I going to achieve a claim? Am I going to achieve a medal? Am I going to achieve a first place? Am I going to get the contract? Am I going to get the house, the car? Is all of that. If you can do both of them, and you don't quit and you have consistency, everything else will fall into place. You don't need to be the fastest, the fittest, the strongest, the bravest, the best shot, the best the soldiering skills, what we call green skills. They all come. They all come with time and practice. And again, like I said, like the details of kettlebells, they'll come. But yeah, if you want to learn, anybody can get good at the sport. If you want to learn it, and you need to learn the details, and you have a good coach, that will come in time. But you need to be able to kind of go, right, this training set is 5 minutes. It's going to be a really tough 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, all I need to be thinking about is these 2 or 3 points. And I need to do it again and again and again. And then from there, I can then, when I get 3.5 minutes in and I'm absolutely sort of dying and hating life, why am I doing it? I'm doing it because my competition's in 3 weeks' time. I'm doing it because this is part of the process to get into that PB. That's such an important thing to have, and it's such a reoccurring thing that I've used ever since learning it and kind of like crafting it. That's definitely got me to where I've got.
Yeah, the thing is, I think a lot of people get wrong is they understand what goals are, but one, there may not be a deeper purpose behind it, and 2, there's not often an action plan created behind it, a step-by-step process, and that goes back as far as, like you said, making your bed. It goes as far back as that starting point in your day, because they go, oh, well, I need to go to the gym, and it's like, well, when, how long for, what are you doing, what's the purpose of the session? And I think that's such a vital part, is knowing what you wanted to achieve over the 4 years, if you knew it was going to be 4 years, and then break it down into those absolute simple actions every single day and compound it over time. And I'd say it's a huge transferable skill. But Ollie, I think what everybody is wanting to know, and I think it's now time. What happens in Kettlebell Sports at the events there? What actually do you guys do in competition?
Okay, good question. So I'm gonna massively simplify this because the sport's grown. The sport started in the 80s in what was the USSR, and it was their like heritage sport and their military sport. And then as the Soviet Union sort of broke down, and a lot of people from Russia went over to America, they took their sport with them. And that's people can talk about who the first people were to do this as a sport, but that's where the sport came from. Okay. Historically, the sport comes from like a farmer and peasant tradition in the kind of like those kind of Baltic areas and regions where there's a lot of intermixing between sort of Slavic and Russian people and Crimean and all of those places, where essentially a POOD, which you sometimes see as like a term that people use in kettlebells or in weightlifting now. So a POOD was a measurement of weight used to weigh grain back in these days. And 2 POODs was around 32 kilograms. 1 POOD was about 16, which is why variations of kettlebell weights are all divisible by 4, because it's all divisible by a POOD. Yeah, and that's literally what happens. So what would happen at the end of the day, they would get 2 of these 2 POOD kettlebells, which was used to weigh grain, and the strong men of the town and the traveling sort of people that were buying and the farmers and community would get together and kind of have a show off of who's the strongest, like who's the king of the village. So each man would have 2 32-kilogram kettlebells, and they'd just stand in a line and just press them and just lift them over their heads and lift them over their heads. And that ultimately then needed to have the rules and a framework, and it got organized. And that's the base root elements for it. So what happened was the sport evolved essentially into you have certain weight groups, certain weight bells, but you essentially have a variety of 2 types of exercises that you do. One's the press, which is kind of like an Olympic jerk press over your head, and one's a snatch, which is where you're snatching a kettlebell over your head. You do it with 2 kettlebells for like 10 minutes or half an hour, or you can do it with 1 kettlebell. And there's certain rules that you can change hands once, or you can change hands like frequently. So now we've got mainly there's a few federations that are going around, but the ones that we have the most involvement with are the WKSF, the World Kettlebell Sports Federation, the IKMF, which is the International Kettlebell Marathon Federation, and the IUKL is the International Union of Kettlebell Lifting. So yeah, it's a bit like, like in boxing, you have different affiliations. Yeah. It's very similar to that. And I'll go and compete in all of these, and most of the people do. But you do have some people that are like very based in one camp. I'm always one of these people that I don't, I try to go away from tribalism as much as I can. So I've got I've certainly done more competitions in the IKMF than anywhere else. I've certainly won sort of 9 of my world gold medals, and my world records are still standard with the IKMF. And it's run by a guy called Stefan, who I've always got along with him. He's does a lot of this work out of his spare time to organise this and things. Similarly to the WKSF, which has got a guy called Olaf who's in charge, who I actually competed against last time. And again, these organisations are really, really good at what they do. And if you love the sport, then it's like the pride of representing your country, and the community that's there is brilliant. So the standard, what's called GS, which is Guy Voice Sport, which again is a Russian term for it, is essentially an event called a biathlon, where you have a double jerk, goes for 10 minutes. Professionally, men use 32 kilogram bells, amateurs 24s, female lifters will use 24s at the pros and 20 or 16s at amateurs. And you do a 10-minute double jerk and you get a point per rep. And you do a 10-minute snatch with one hand change and you get half a point per rep, and you add the reps up, and whoever's got the best reps wins. And you have like weight groups for it, change between each one. IKMF do marathons, which are half an hour for a half marathon, or an hour, which is normally done with one kettlebell. But you've got some lifters like David Cohen and Alistair Lee, who I train, and Susie Edge, who I train, who have done it with 2 kettlebells, which is a real show of endurance and strength. Normally you change hands. The way they do it is you can pick whatever bell you want to lift, but you get a point based on its weight. So you can have a tactic to go light, you can have a tactic to go heavy, and it can go in your favor or not. But you have to last the time you do. So if you're doing a half-hour lift, you have to do half an hour. If you put the bell down beforehand, that's it. You get 0, which is really it's really important that stays in the sport, in my view, because it shows that kind of similarity between most endurance feats. So you don't get points for running 20 miles in the marathon. You have to run the whole marathon to run the whole marathon, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's something that other lifters might disagree with me. That's fine, it's their business, but that's kind of like important to me. And again, you can either do the jerk, you can do the clean and jerk, which is called long cycle, you can do the snatch, or you can do a half snatch where you throw the bell over your head and then it comes down to your rack and throw it over your head. So I've competed in all of these events. I've got my favorites. I've got the ones that I do sort of the best at. We then have a heavy group, which is doing 10 minutes with a 40 kilogram kettlebell, which is something that up until I got beaten last year in it by Andreas, who's a good friend of mine, and he whooped me fair and square. But that was something that I had a lot of success in previously for the first few years of it. There's great lifters in this country like Johnny Skinner, who's a brilliant lifter at the 40 kilogram. The girls do it for 28 kilograms. There's Kate Williams, who's an outstanding lifter at feats of strength like that, and you've got girls like Debbie Moulton, who's not far behind, and Sarah Jarvis, who I trained, who's probably the lightest lifter I ever trained to get up to lifting the 28 kilogram bells. So that's quite an exciting sport. It's growing quite big because there's a lot of pride attached to being strong enough to lift the 40 kilogram kettlebell for 10 minutes, or 28 kilogram if you're a female lifter. So that's the sport in as big a nutshell. There's many other variations of it. There's many other organizations that are kind of like starting out there, but you can get drawn down the rabbit hole of it. To guys who are interested in this, if you're in the UK, the big thing to do is go into the UK website, the English Kettlebell Association, and I'll give all the trips at the end, and that's how you start finding a club near you. Unfortunately, COVID massively dented this sport, because clubs just couldn't keep going, and the amount of clubs that closed during the pandemic, the amount of gyms that closed that had clubs that were great but just didn't make it, and we're fighting tooth and nail to get back to those numbers. We've kind of really done, like people in the EKA and other clubs, and myself, like we've worked really hard to get the sport back to where it is, and it's really important to us. We're putting a bid in for England to host a major world championships in the next year or so, and that would be pretty big for us as a community to kind of really grow it. But yeah, for people who are kind of thinking, what is Kettlebell Sports? The best way to do it is go on YouTube and type it in and find out. You can look at people on
Wolfpack Fitness Cheshire, which is my gym. We're really big on Facebook, so you can see a lot of things on Facebook and Instagram about the sport. You can take a look at the IKMF on Facebook, and you can take a look at the WKSF and the EKA. And we are all up and down the UK, so there's some great gyms in Scotland that do it. So you can take a look at the Scottish Kettlebell Association, and you can take a look at lifters like Yvonne, Alan Lyon, and their gyms up there. So it is something you can do up and down the country.
Yeah, I love that you've kind of gone to this side, because when you were talking there about competing, I was sensing a huge community vibe. I was sensing a huge supportive community vibe, similar to what I've spoken about on CrossFit on the podcast. And I think that's what I love about, you know, even smaller sports, medium-sized sports. You do often find a really strong community, and then it obviously led for you to creating your, you know, to having your own gym, to building that community. But what I think is really fascinating, to try and get the link here to what we're talking about in the transfer of skills, is you talk about lots of gyms aren't around anymore, yet yours is. What do you think the difference is there, that you were able to sustain that difficult lockdown time and keep going?
Well, I mean, firstly, there's no, you know, I'm here at the moment, but, you know, lessons I'm learning still to this day is don't take it for granted, because if the moment you do that is the moment the ground goes from underneath your feet. And yeah, the gym's been very lucky, and we've done pretty well for ourselves. We've been nominated for some of the Independent Fitness Awards for the first time this year, which is a big thing for me. Whether you win or not, regardless, it kind of shows that you're working with people. I built the gym on a shoestring budget to keep the costs down, is one thing that I did. The other thing that happened was we're predominantly an outdoor gym. So as lockdown eased, we were one of the first ones to be allowed to open, and that helped us get a foot in the door. But again, it's just that thing of like, and business can be like this, you know. Business is at times like, can we get to Friday? That's the thing. Can we get to Friday? Can we sign these? You know, my target's to sign 3 more members. Can we get 3 more members? Can I do an advert that brings in this? And that can be what business can be like for a bit. And you have to be as similar to a sporting environment. You have to understand the possibilities. The possibilities are that the business can succeed, and the possibilities are that the business can fail. And you have to make your peace with both of them. As a kind of like a philosophy on how you grow yourself. You have to look at where you want to be in 1 year, where you want to be in 2 years, where you want to be in 5 years. I'm probably not the best person to give out business advice in all reality. Like I'll say that. I'll say, don't follow me for business advice. Like decisions on what you do with your money when you borrow and things like that, you know, that's not my realm of expertise by any means. But you do have to have your eyes open and be willing to put the work in. You know, it is even at this point, it is a 70-hour week, minimum every week. And if you're not prepared to do that, then, you know, in some sense, save yourself the heartache. But even if you try and you fail, and this is my big thing that I've always said, like I'll always swing and miss. And even if the business doesn't survive, even if the business does go, what I've learned in the 5 years now of running a business is a skill that I can transfer to any part in time. And it's far more important that you're there for the fight than you don't get into it at all. And I would say that to everyone, but you do have to have your strategies. You do have to break the process down. You do have to have your goals and your visions, and you do have to be able to manage putting the work in. A lot of people when they start business, they just have that thing of being and I was probably very much a victim of this at first. You're just going to be a busy fool. You're always doing something, but never really having anything much to show for it. You can certainly have that. I mean, same thing when you're starting a podcast. Same thing if you're doing an online business. Same thing if you're a self-employed tradesman. You can have that approach to life. And you see people, if you work, like I do a lot of work in health and safety on construction sites and things like that, and you see tradespeople who are just a busy fool, but there's no plan. They just turn up like a whirlwind, and they're just a mess of looking busy but not achieving much. Whereas some people are incredibly methodical and organized, and boom, 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 off they go. So that helps. It is sad to see the fitness industry take a hit, because there's a lot of good people I know who have had gyms that have gone. And there's a lot of big chain commercial gyms that have gone. I started working for LA Fitness, and that's pretty much disappeared in this country.
Yeah.
Pure Gym have had to close gyms down. In our local area, Total Fitness was a big gym that had to close down. It's not it's not easy managing. It's not easy working in the fitness business, because the first sign of trouble was you're one of the first things people cancel in terms of membership. People have that conception that you don't need a gym, you can just go out for a run and do some press ups and stuff, but it's not essentially as simple as that. But people's mindset to it, as soon as push comes to shove, it's one of the first things you get rid of. You're going to cancel your gym membership before you cancel your Netflix subscription.
Oh yeah, and you're right. There's a huge difference between being a good athlete or a good coach and running a business. There is a huge difference. And I've had the conversation recently. I've been in this industry for 13 years. I'm very good at what I do in regards of the coaching side of things. The business is still infancy. I'm still learning every single day about something new, about wording on a website, or making something easier. It's a constant learning process, and your learning is now moving and into creating a new legacy of kettlebell performers, I believe.
Yeah, I've been really lucky to get to work with some people. You're on about the community of kettlebells as a sport, and it's hands down the best community I've been involved with. The people are just like, you have all these great bonds and relationships with people throughout the whole year. You talk to each other on Facebook, and then you meet up, and you're competing against one of your best friends, and it's over something as stupid as like you have to buy him a beer if he beats you or something like that. But you're going to literally lift until you're perfectly happy. We say people are happy to lift until they collapse on the platform, and some people do. With physical fitness, you need to do this sport at the top end with the weights that people are now lifting is insane, and it's only going to get better as more people come into the sport. Being 40 years old trying to compete with these guys, you're literally tearing your body apart. But the success that I've had with it has been largely down with the people that just happen to have come to me for the training, and they've had the grit to stick it out to get good at it. It's a weird sport in certain senses, because a lot of people come to it a little later in life and they've done other sports, and some people go into
after doing kettlebells, and then they very often come back to it, and there's something about the relationship you have with yourself when you're really pushing yourself that really comes out to you. I can't really liken it to anything, because you're not, like, it's a bit of a cliche thing saying you're not in competition with the other person, you're in competition with yourself. But in kettlebells, you're always in competition with the weight, and the weight will almost always win every time. That becomes kind of like self-addictive. You kind of like, you can see footage of it, and you can see certain times where I've done it where you see people lifting and you're not entirely sure if they're actually there. They're just kind of like so absorbed in it. It's almost like long distance running can be pretty similar, I think, in that respect. People kind of you can go for a 30-minute run and almost not really remember it, but be really kind of like tough on yourself while you're doing it. There's something about it that really draws to people in that sense, and you learn a lot about yourself when you push yourself to those limits. And then the fact that you're competing against someone, or big competitions, you can be competing against 10, 12 people in your group at the top level, but that's kind of irrelevant when you're there in the actual hour or half hour or 10 minutes. You're kind of just competing with that next rep, or you're just competing with the weight of the bell. Apart from running, there's not a lot of sports that can do that, and I think that's one reason why people come back to it.
Yeah, because you're not only now looking after friends or clients now, you are now, I believe, a parent of an athlete within this sport. How are you finding that?
It's been a real good experience, actually. So my daughter Poppy, she's one of those rare people that she's got that real passion for stuff, and she loves being in the team. She loves, like, she's a celebrity in the sport in her own right, in terms of like all the other countries love her, all the team, like the Australian team are always messaging me saying is Poppy coming to this competition, and she's just such a nice, vibrant person that people like gravitate towards. She does a lot of dance, she does a lot of gymnastic type stuff, so she's already in shape, but she grew up watching me compete, and at the age of like 5 or 6 she just picked up one of the small kettlebells and was just really good at it, and so she started coming to the classes. Like a lot of the times my partner works in she's a critical care nurse, so she works shifts, so a lot of the classes my daughters are there for, so they just watched it and they just ended up, one day she just picked up a kettlebell and enjoyed it, so she's gone to like 4 international competitions with me.
Wow.
She's won quite a fair few herself. She's had some of her friends come with her. We've now got a kids class based purely on how well known she is at the school for doing it, and the school's really supportive. I give her time off to go and compete. I try to make it clear to her that she doesn't have to do it for me, so she knows that like at some point with her dance, as she gets more serious, she may have to make that decision to kind of do more dance, and kettlebells might have to move to the side. But one thing that it's done for her, and it does for a lot of people, is she's been in some pretty big moments because of the sport. So she's already kind of like used to being on her stage, and the sport does that because you go to a major competition, you've got TV cameras, you've got people shouting and screaming, it's loud, there's a crowd, there's it can be quite intense, it can be intimidating for grown-ups, but for someone who's kind of like 6, 7, 8 years old, dealing with that pressure, it's really sort of toughened her up a little bit. So the concept of her being nervous at a dance show or something, or a school project, to kind of like really subsides. That level of confidence is a really important thing, like for her development. If there's a lot of things that competing in sports as a kid really give you. It's a really important part of growing up, like learning that you can lose, learning that you can win, learning how to be part of a team, because she's part of the England team, so we traveled together for like a weekend. They kind of like live together. Learning all of those skills at an early age is really good for her, I think. Particularly when I try to make it as pressure free as possible, in terms of like your dad wants you to win or things like that. So I try not to be that pushy parent. And she's enjoying it, and as long as she's enjoying it, then she can stick with it. But the moment she says she's done with it, and that's fine with me.
It's experience in the early stages of parenting of an athlete, a lot younger. Mine's only 6, but being an athlete, it's quite hard. It's something I'm learning every day. Ollie, what's next for you?
Well, I'm getting towards the end of my career lifting. I said this would be my last year, and everybody laughed. And then lo and behold, I had a few competitions where I didn't perform as well as I want. So I'm ending it on my terms. I'm still competitive at the top tier, which is important for me. I'm not going into world championships knowing I'm going to win, like I may have done 2 years ago. I've won 10. And at some point, you have to turn around and go, it kind of becomes, the number kind of loses its meaning a little bit. So I'm definitely winding that down. So my last few competitions are coming up, which is going to give me a lot of time and energy to spend on sort of building an online business to come and kind of like help teach people and help grow the sport. But my main thing that I want to do going forward is working with the EKA, really develop the sport and really push it to a place where, like you said, nobody really knows about this as a sport. And if we can get to a place where, it becomes a part of life, we're going to go and watch a kettlebell competition. We're going to go to the gym, and, if there's a club, if you know that you can go and join a club, like, as simple as finding a karate school, or as simple as finding like a gymnastics or a netball club. If we can get the sport to that level, then that's really what my interest is in this country. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to kind of being a part of. There's some great personalities in the EKA at the moment. And we've got a lot of potential to really push this out into the school systems and out into kind of like the commercial gym environment. If every leisure center had a kettlebell club with a coach who is qualified and trained, they don't have to be world champions, but if every leisure center had a kettlebell club, that would be like a pretty cool accomplishment. That would be a pretty cool thing. There's a phrase somebody told me in the Marines that always stuck with me, which is like, we always want to leave something better than when we found it. So it's that thing of like, one of the stamps that we were there was that it's now better when we leave, which is something that you can talk about geopolitically as much as you want to with kind of what we've done in the last 20 years. But that's something that's really sort of like passionate with me. So for this sport, I want to leave this sport bigger and better than when I found it. And if I can have a part in doing that, then I've done something I can be proud of, because all your personal accolades, you go to a biggest time frame, they don't matter. Like you can, like every record I've got is going to get broken. It's natural progression of the sport. I've won 10, someone's going to win 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, Dan is 7 rushes, way more qualified and capable than me. You know, so just because I've won what I've won doesn't make me any better than anybody else. And on the grand scheme of things, who cares? Whereas, like, if we can be the generation that made this sport big and made this sport as big as we can get it, that's a much better and a much more worthwhile endeavor in terms of kind of like the effort you put into it. So that's my main motivation for coming and doing podcasts, coming and doing appearances, putting on competitions, putting on shows and things like that.
Yeah, it's very legacy driven, which I can relate to massively. If somebody wants to follow your journey or find out more about how they can get involved, where's the best place for them to go?
Okay, so following myself selfishly, like you can find me on Facebook. You can find the gym that I've got, Wolfpack Fitness Cheshire. We're on Instagram and we're on Facebook, and it'd be good if you give us a like and a follow. And I will have, I do train clients online, so I do online training for people who want to get into the sport. But I'm trying to get a more viable professional website that does it all automatically. So I want to have a full online website that just has step-by-step videos and instructions on how to train yourself with kettlebells and how to understand the sport and how to really get into it. But more importantly than that, if you're interested in it, go on the EKA website, go follow them on Facebook and social media, follow the big competitions. There's IUKL competitions coming up in October in Greece. It will be live streamed. The IKMF World Championships will be live streamed in November. It's going to be in Belgium. We're getting kind of like 6,000 to 8,000 views for a competition. You know, we want to be triple that in all reality, you know, over the next sort of like 12 to 18 months. So we really want people to kind of like follow it, get engaged, and kind of realize again, appreciation for how sort of good these events are and how tough the sport is and how hard it is to win at this level. So yeah, follow the EKA, follow the IKMF, follow the WKSF, follow the IUKL. And it's not that, you know, the gyms, the training, the coaching's there for you if you want to get involved with it. Almost every single person during lockdown bought a kettlebell to some point. You know, almost everyone did this. But it's, you know, whether it's a doorstop, whether it's in your garage, whether whatever you're doing with it, dust it off. Go find. If you can't find a club, get in touch with people online. And you know, most of us are happy to do a lot of work with you guys just for the sake of growing the sport. But there's enough accredited coaches online. It doesn't have to be myself. You can go find somebody who get you into it, get into the basics, and enjoy doing it. Enjoy having fun, getting in shape, getting some muscle on you, getting lean, getting your cardio up. It's a brilliant sport for that.
Yeah, I can feel the passion, and I wish you all the best with the endeavor and the goal of making this bigger. You know, because I think if you've got the purpose and passion, it's going to happen. So, Ollie, thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you. No, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been a blast, and it's something that, again, I'm really passionate about growing and speaking. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this.
I appreciate it, and thank you for everybody that is tuned in today. Hey, if you want to give it a go, please go and have a look. If it's just inspired you to get moving and to go to the gym or anything, that's all we're looking to do with this podcast, is just help one person today do something a little bit more with their life, work on their personal development, their business, their parenting. So if you have, please make sure you share the episode, you like and subscribe on any of the channels. All the support is really appreciated. So thank you, Ollie. Thank you for everybody joining me. And as I love to remind everybody, there is always another game. Take care.